Episode 1. The Dogs Don't Look. This car, its hood was gone, and it whistled as the wind pushed through the exposed engine. The light bounced off wires and casings not meant for sunlight. The stereo was ripped out, and every time we hit a bump, the little wires inside would twitch like spiders' legs. The fabric on the ceiling had long since lost its attachment to the roof and was tacked into place. The way it sagged reminded me of illustrations of the gravitational plane, large dips in spacetime where a planet or star dragged themselves further into my orbit. I named her Opportunity after the Mars rover, because, like the Mars rover, she traveled rocky, desolate terrain, survived long past her expiration date, and because they were both made in 2004. The desert stretched around us for miles, scrub brush and low-lying prickly pear dotting the land, as the heat of the sun caused hills in the distance to wave. No air conditioning, but with the windows down, the rushing air was still a treat against my sunburned skin. We drove as fast as the car could take us, dust rippling up behind us in a cloud. The best thing about this car was that the back seat was removed. More room for storage, less room for people. We approached the military checkpoint and slowed to a stop. I got out, leaving my door open, and opened the one behind it. Ray stretched out the passenger side, tall, lean, dressed in all black, like the shadow of a tree or a column of smoke. He left his door open and pulled open the back door as well. I unlocked the trunk. We both stood with our hands up. I made a point to comb my sweaty hair over my face with my fingers and put my back to the cameras. I could feel their lenses burning into my spine, searching for anything interesting. Large sniffing dogs circled the car, paying us no mind as armed guards stood nearby watching them work. The guards never looked at us. It never bothered me. I didn't want to know them either. But what hurt was the dogs, to have them walk past me like I didn't exist. No hint of recognition or interest, despite doing this 100 times. I never felt more inhuman than standing there, dusty, hot, exhausted, wanting nothing more than to reach out and scratch that good boy's ears, and he didn't even realize I was there. The dogs were experts in their careers, one circling the back, the second climbing into the cabin. The car was packed with supplies, but it didn't stop them from inspecting every inch. Once they grew bored, they walked back to their post. I tried to make eye contact, wiggling my finger at them, but they walked right past me. Ray looked to the guards, who gestured for us to go without looking back at him. We got in and continued on. Episode 2. Lotion and Gasoline. We weren't too far now, so I soaked up every bit of the wind that I could, as plastic bags sang in the air and the fabric of the ceiling danced along. In the distance, we could see the low, long, dark wall of homesteads that lined closely along the boundary of DeReg. A calico wall of chain link, particle board, and sheet metal. Miscellaneous flags of different colors waved in the wind from homesteads of individuals who'd claimed a small slice of land as their own private nation. We pulled up and parked the car in its usual space, surrounded by a dozen equally Frankenstein-esque cars. We both grabbed our guns, got out, and turned our attention toward the homestead we had parked in front of. It was larger than the other homes here at the entrance. The man we needed to see lived in 2 shipping containers stacked on top of each other, painted white but sand-blasted by the high desert. There was an extension jutting out the front made of welded sheets of metal. He had a small yard littered with cans of gas, auto parts, tools, and scraps. A very tall fence circled the perimeter, the kind from a baseball field, with barbed wire up top. It was absurdly tall for the size of his lot. There was a layer of oil and grime on everything. "Hey, Bog, we're back," Ray yelled loudly. We heard a grunt and turned back to the car to start unloading. Bulk bags of beans, rice, and a few 5-gallon bottles of water, in addition to several small bags filled with various requests from those that lived near us. I pulled out a bag of fun-sized chocolate bars to keep on top. I also brought back 2 trash bags of empty soda cans, a little project of my own. The door of Bog's hut opened, and he stepped out. He was a big man, very biker-esque. He wore black pants, but hadn't put on his shoes. His darkly tanned stomach was large and round, and patched with glowing white hairs. He never wore a shirt. He carried a large gun in one hand that he was prone to gesturing with. "Got mine?" he asked. I nodded and pulled out a large bottle of lavender lotion with a pump top. It had to be lavender. It had to have a pump top. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know why. Ray came behind me with 5 gallons of gasoline and a fan belt. He walked past Bog to set them inside his fence. I thanked Bog and handed him the key to opportunity as he assessed his new lotion. I tried to push away any vulgar thoughts about the lotion, but just then, a glint of sweat caught my eye as it rolled down his neck into a silver forest of chest hairs. White and silver chest hairs that glowed over his deeply tanned and leathered skin. His chest heaved with his breathing. Gross. Bog had a nice arrangement set up for himself. It was impossible to park a car at the entrance and expect it to stay safe. To arrive was to lose your vehicle. So instead, upon arrival, people traded him the keys for goods, info, or future services. Then the car became his, and in turn, he loaned them out to serve all of DeReg. He protected the cars, kept them running, and lent them out to people in exchange for goods. I would dare to call him the king of DeReg. Nearly all economy and all those who come and go through him. But he had his rules. He cares more about his cars than he does the sob story. With about 40 cars to loan each day and 20,000 people, his standards are high. He doesn't trust druggies or drinkers. There is no leaving to go binge for a week. Just supplies, same day. If you betray his trust, you're done. And if he just didn't like you, the cost was a lot more than lotion, gas, and a fan belt. I may have my issues, but I am at least functioning enough to take a car, which has in turn given me an advantage to survival in DeReg. Ray reemerged from the hut with our wagons. I thanked Bog again, and we started loading our haul. Once they were loaded, we strapped thick leather belts around our waists that were tied to the wagon handles, allowing us to caravan in the goods hands-free. Luckily, land in New Mexico is hard and flat. These heavy loads would be impossible if there were hills or sand involved. Ray went ahead first. I followed. Episode 3, Tiny Treats for Big Men. In this part of DeReg near the front, violence is frequent. But the more distance you put behind you, the more tame and spread out it gets. Up here, people live on top of each other in small claims of land, some no larger than a living room. They form odd little city blocks with walkways winding through. It reminds me of haphazard prison cells. Only, instead of trying to escape, they all chose to sit in their cells, guarding it from the rest of the world. We passed plot after plot, each one ringed in some improvised perimeter, barbed wire coiled on poles, warped chain link, broken pallets, or dented metal sheeting. Behind them, tents sagging in the heat, lean-tos barely upright, and shelters built from scavenged junk that somehow held together. Most had their yards covered in tarps, casting colored hues and blocking the New Mexico sun. Through this area, the path was tight and only allowed us to walk single file. Someone coming the other way could squeeze past, but barely. We passed plot after plot. One fence had doll heads tied by the hair to the chain link. Another fence had plastic candy canes sticking up from the top. While there is a lot in common between all the residents of DeReg, there were different concentrations in different areas. The junkies and loonies stuck near the entrance, the northernmost boundary. The artsy raver types dominated a triangle-shaped expanse through the center. The southeast corner was where the militant survivalists and off-gridders made their claim. We called this the base. They had it completely walled off, and no one knew what it looked like inside. To the southwest, near the back, was where we lived. I like to think we were the most normal of the inhabitants, which isn't saying much. But life in the back did lend to fewer strangers and more permanent homesteads. We walked, pulling our wagons, guns at the ready. Ray carried a large sword as well. Gunfire generally led to more gunfire, simply for the fun of it. Everyone up here was eager for action. A sword could de-escalate a situation without all the fanfare. While we'd been in a tough spot on a few of these trips, it's important to understand that most of the people living near the entrance became homeless because they were affected in some way that they couldn't function by normal rules. They were crazy, drug-addled, dysfunctionally low IQ, or a fun mix of all three. As a result, they were usually as easily distracted by something else as they were drawn to you in the first place. There was always the threat of being raided for our haul, but living near the entrance meant they were the first to receive aid when daily deliveries came from various charities and churches. They didn't want for much besides drugs and entertainment. Because we'd taken this route many times, we saw a lot of familiar faces. We approached a plot with a large old van, turned on its side, bottom side out. This van was our marker to turn. I ran my fingers along the exhaust pipe as we passed by. A man lived here that I'd been trying to win over. He was large, Hispanic, and generally shirtless. He sat beside the van under his tarp on a cinder block with a very, very large knife. He was guarded by a wooden wall, a tarp stretched to the back of his plot. On his wall hung a stained t-shirt. It had a large rip near the neck, stained with blood, and a red X spray painted on it. We made eye contact. He watched us in the same way a well-fed bear might watch a deer, deciding if he even had room. I reached into one of the bags and pulled out a mini candy bar. The first rule of DeReg is that you never go into someone's claim uninvited. While crime and murder happen frequently, if you were killed for crossing into a property, you had only yourself to blame. Many inhabitants sat ready, eager for the opportunity to attack. I smiled at the man, not with my mouth, but with my eyes, and set the candy just outside his fence opening, on the ground. Then continued on behind Ray. Being a relatively small woman, there was benefit to winning over the big men, make them want to protect you instead of rob you. I like to think these little gestures would save me one day. It was good to have Ray around, but despite being almost a foot taller than me, he was skeletal. We probably weighed the same. We wound our way through DeReg for a while. I set my little treats down for my would-be heroes. I didn't like to talk to them, but so when they tried, I'd usually just smile. I felt like if I talked, then I owed them something. I couldn't get in the business of making deliveries across DeReg. It spread out the influence too much. Though, with men outnumbering women 3-1, I knew what they'd really want, and that wasn't something I wanted to give either. I preferred to be the funny little girl that left a chocolate every few days. The funny little girl who, if she screamed, they'd peek their heads up, recognize her face, and with a chocolate-induced fondness, pummel her assailant. That was all these relationships needed to be.